Imagine waking up one morning and finding your mailbox gone. Just like that, no warning, no explanation. And when you call your HOA, they tell you it was against community standards. Sounds small, right? But what if I told you this wasn't about a mailbox at all, it was about power? About control, about reminding a black homeowner that his place here was conditional. But here's what they didn't know, his cousin runs the Postal Service for the entire district. And when they tried to humiliate him, they started a fight they couldn't win. This isn't just a story about rules. It's about dignity, pride, and why you never underestimate someone who knows their worth. Stick around, because by the end, you're gonna want to cheer for what happens next. The morning sun broke through the blinds, painting long strips of light across the living room floor. Marcus sat quietly at his kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, his eyes fixed on a stack of unpaid bills. It wasn't that he didn't have the money, it was the principle of the thing. He had worked his way up in life, every success hard-earned through persistence and faith. But these past few weeks, something as simple as receiving his mail had turned into a battle. And deep down, Marcus knew this wasn't about mail, it was about respect. He had moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago, proud of what he'd achieved. A black man in his early 40s, Marcus had worked his way up from nothing. Raised by a single mother in a modest home, he understood struggle from the inside out. When he bought this house, it was a symbol of dignity, proof that years of sweat and sacrifice could carve out a place in this world. But some people didn't see it that way. Some people only saw his skin before they saw his story. It started subtly, a cold glance from a neighbor who barely managed to say hello. A comment about keeping things neat when his lawn was freshly cut. Then came the wall letters, those stiff, polite threats dressed as reminders. At first, it was small things, the trash can left out a few minutes too long, the basketball hoop in his driveway, even the color of his front door. Marcus had complied, because he wasn't one for drama. He believed in peace. He believed in community. But then came the day he walked outside and found a concrete post planted where his mailbox should have been. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe construction, maybe some utility work, but when he called the HOA, their answer was anything but accidental. Your mailbox, the voice said flatly, was not in compliance with community standards. It was too large, too close to the curb. We removed it. Marcus stared at the spot in disbelief. The mailbox he'd installed with his own hands, the one his daughter had helped him paint 2 summers ago, gone without warning. And now, a bare concrete stump stood like a silent insult in its place. "Where's my mail then?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You can pick it up at the post office until you install a compliant box," came the reply. "That could take weeks. You didn't even send me a notice." "It's in the bylaws," the voice said coldly. "You agreed to the rules when you bought the house." And with that, the line went dead. Marcus clenched the phone, heat rising in his chest. Rules. They always had a rule, didn't they? A reason, a regulation, a clause buried deep in paperwork, weaponized against people who looked like him. It wasn't just about a mailbox. It was the arrogance, the entitlement, the way they acted like his very presence in this neighborhood was conditional. Like he should be grateful to be here. He knew this game. He'd seen it play out in boardrooms, in schools, in every space where power hid behind a smile. He drove to the post office that afternoon, waited in line for nearly an hour, and finally collected a stack of mail thick with late notices. The clerk apologized, but Marcus barely heard her. He was thinking about how this was designed to inconvenience him, to break his patience, to make him bow his head. They wanted compliance, submission, silence, but Marcus wasn't built for that. Not anymore. That evening, as he stood on his porch staring at the empty space where his mailbox once stood, his phone buzzed. It was his cousin, DeAndre. "Yo, cuz, long time no talk, how you been?" Marcus tried to sound normal, but his voice cracked with frustration. "Man, I'm dealing with some nonsense over here." He explained the whole thing, the letters, the removal, the cold tone of the HOA rep. When he finished, there was a pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. "They really don't know, do they?" DeAndre said. "Know what?" Marcus asked. "That your cousin runs the damn Postal Service for this district." Marcus blinked, a slow grin creeping across his face. DeAndre wasn't just an employee, he was the regional director. And in that moment, something shifted. Marcus felt the weight of anger transform into resolve. They thought they could humiliate him. They thought they had the power. But power was about to change hands. The next morning, Marcus dressed sharp. A crisp shirt, polished shoes, because when you move with dignity, you remind people who you are. He drove downtown, straight to DeAndre's office. The reunion was warm, filled with laughter and brotherhood, but there was business to handle. "I got you," DeAndre said firmly. "First thing, we'll make sure your mail service continues uninterrupted. Second, we're gonna send a message. They wanna play with federal property. Let's educate them." Marcus knew mailboxes weren't just pieces of metal, they were federal property once installed for mail service. Tampering with them without authorization. A crime, a serious one, and this HOA, in their arrogance, had stepped into a fight they didn't understand. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at Marcus's door, delivered by a smiling postal inspector. The letter was addressed to the HOA board, outlining federal statutes on mail obstruction and unauthorized removal of mail receptacles. The language was firm, precise, and undeniable. They were given 72 hours to restore Marcus's mailbox to its original condition, or face legal consequences. When Marcus walked to the community meeting that evening, the energy shifted the moment he entered. Conversations hushed. Eyes followed him. The board president, a woman named Karen with a tight smile and tighter grip on control, looked visibly rattled. "Marcus," she began, her voice sugary sweet, "we were just about to save it," Marcus said calmly, laying the letter on the table. "You broke the law. Here's what happens next." The room fell silent as the words sank in. For once, Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority spoke for him now. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. About reclaiming the dignity they thought they could take. Karen stared at the letter like it was a live wire, her manicured fingers trembling just enough for Marcus to notice. Behind her, the other board members exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke at first. The silence stretched, heavy and charged, until one man finally cleared his throat. "Marcus, surely there's been some misunderstanding," he said softly, trying to smooth things over. "No misunderstanding," Marcus replied, his voice calm but ironclad. "Federal law is very clear. You don't remove a mailbox without authorization. You don't tamper with mail. You don't block access to postal services. What you did wasn't just petty, it was illegal." Karen's smile faltered. "We were only enforcing the bylaws," she said, her tone defensive now. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking on hers. "Your bylaws don't override federal law, and you don't override my right to be treated with respect in my own home." His words weren't loud, but they carried a weight that filled the room. The board president swallowed hard, her composure cracking. Marcus could feel the shift in the air, the power dynamic reversing, the control slipping from their fingers. For years, they had counted on people like him staying silent, bowing their heads, complying without question. But not today. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, sliding the letter across the table toward Karen. "You will reinstall my original mailbox exactly as it was, at your expense. And you'll do it before the 72-hour deadline. If you fail, this goes beyond warnings. You'll be facing federal charges and fines that make HOA dues look like pocket change." Karen opened her mouth, but Marcus raised a hand slightly, a gesture so calm, so commanding, it froze her words in place. "This isn't a negotiation," he added. The meeting ended in a tense, wordless shuffle of papers and hushed whispers. Marcus walked out slowly, his back straight, his head high. For the first time in weeks, the tight knot in his chest loosened. It wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about something bigger, the principle, the fight for dignity in a world that kept trying to chip away at it. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of metal clanging in his front yard. He stepped outside to see two HOA maintenance workers sweating under the sun, struggling to reinstall his mailbox exactly where it had been. The concrete post they had planted so arrogantly was gone. In its place, Marcus's original box stood proudly, restored like a soldier returning from war. Karen appeared a few minutes later, clutching a clipboard like a shield. Her face was tight, but her voice was syrupy sweet. "Marcus," she said, "we regret any inconvenience this may have caused. The board just wanted to maintain community standards." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Community standards should never come at the cost of someone's rights." His tone wasn't angry, just firm, final. She nodded quickly, retreating before her composure cracked completely. Marcus watched her go, the weight of the past weeks settling into something solid, a lesson, a victory carved from resistance. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch, the mailbox gleaming in the soft glow of dusk. His daughter, Jasmine, curled up next to him, her small hand slipping into his. "Daddy," she said softly, "why did they take our mailbox?" Marcus looked at her, his heart twisting at the innocence in her eyes. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "people think rules make them better than others. They forget that fairness matters more than power. But when someone tries to take what's yours, you don't just let them. You stand up, calm, strong, and smart. You don't let anyone make you feel small." Jasmine nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. And in that moment, Marcus realized this fight had never been just for him. It was for her, for every child who needed to know that dignity wasn't negotiable, that respect wasn't a privilege, it was a right. His phone buzzed. A message from DeAndre. "Saw the inspector's report. They're on thin ice now. Call me if they try anything else." Marcus smiled. Family, power, solidarity. That's what they didn't count on, that behind every black man who refuses to bow, there's a legacy of strength that runs deeper than any rulebook. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood seemed quieter. No more letters in his mailbox. No more sly comments. People waved a little more often when they saw him, though he could read the discomfort in their eyes, the realization that the man they underestimated had boundaries they couldn't cross. And word spread, like it always does. Not just in his neighborhood, but in conversations at barbershops, churches, family gatherings. Marcus's story became more than a cautionary tale, it became a blueprint. A reminder that fighting back doesn't always mean shouting or swinging fists. Sometimes it means knowing your rights, using your voice, and refusing to shrink. One Sunday, as Marcus walked Jasmine to the park, an older black couple from down the street stopped him. The husband reached out, clasping Marcus's hand with quiet pride. "Brother," he said, "you did what needed to be done. Been living here 10 years, and I've seen them pull stunts on folks before. But you reminded them we ain't here by permission. We belong." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. He nodded, gripping the man's hand firmly. Because that was the truth. They belonged. They had always belonged. And no amount of bylaws or backhanded rules would change that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus stood a little taller. This wasn't just a win for him, it was a win for every homeowner who'd been told, in words or in silence, that they didn't measure up. It was a message carved into stone: respect is not optional. And as he watched his daughter run ahead, her laughter spilling into the evening air, Marcus knew one thing for certain: this was the beginning of something bigger. A fight not born of anger, but of love. Love for family, for dignity, for the unshakable belief that justice wasn't a gift. It was a right worth defending, mailbox or not.